Good evening, everyone. I am your bard, your storyteller, your curator of tales. I am Archibald, and welcome to another episode of Fabulously Creepy Stories. Can you believe it's been an entire week now? And I'm sure you've all had the most wonderful of nightmares from last week's tales. Now, I have quite the collection for you today to renew those fanciful dreams. Ah, yes, welcome to the stream, Shaolin. I hope you're ready for quite the creeps tonight. Let us start off with a short tale today. This one is from scoopwhoop.com. The title, Next Time You'll Know Better, written by I Post at Midnight. Have you ever walked into a room and found a vampire? No, not the sexy kind, but a foul creature with bony limbs and ashen skin. The kind that snarls as you enter, like a beast about to pounce. The kind that roots you to the spot with its sunken, hypnotic eyes, rendering you unable to flee as you watch the hideous thing uncoil from the shadows. As your heart started racing to your legs refused to, as you felt time slow as the creature crosses the room in the darkness, in a blink of an eye. Have you shuddered with fear when it places one clawed hand atop your head and another under your chin so it can tilt you, exposing your neck? Have you ever squirmed as its rough, dry tongue slides down your cheek, over your jaw, to your throat, in a slithering search that's seeking your artery? Have you felt its hot breath releasing a hiss against your skin when it probes your pulse, the flow that leads to your brain? Has its tongue rested there, throbbing slightly as it savoring the moment? Have you experienced a sinking, sunken blackness as you discovered that not all vampires feed on blood? Some feed on memories. Well, have you? Maybe not. But let me rephrase the question. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgotten why you came in? Now, for the end of this tale, I do have quite the funny pun about forgetting I'm going to tell you. Moving on to the next story. We return to the creepypasta stories. This one, as I believe, was released recently onto the creepypasta site. It is called Something Comes Into My Room Every Night, written by Stephen R. Gray, aka Lighthouse Horror. Now, I know I have always read, not always, but oftentimes read very long stories from creepypasta. This one is on the shorter side, so we could get through more stories tonight. I'm sure you'll all be so happy for that. Or perhaps be too scared for that. So let's begin our tale. When I was 7 years old, my mother and I moved to a small town in Manchester. It was a rough time for me as my father had just up and left a few weeks before. My mom told me that he had taken a better job somewhere. She told me that he still loved and cared about me. But even at such a young age, I understood that he had left us. It was Halloween week, and I started at my new school on the 25th of October. As a stubborn 7-year-old, I insisted on walking there by myself. My mother frowned, thought it over, then agreed with one caveat. All right, as long as we walk the path together every night before school starts, and you promise to stay on the trail. She had bought a small 2-bedroom cottage less than a mile from my school, so it wouldn't be far. It was a nice place, but I guess my father gone, nothing could really feel like home. The evening before I began school, the two of us walked into the forest behind the house. Although the sun was started to set, the path was clearly lit. What a perfect way to school! Can you believe this house is still available? She said. I nodded but said nothing. We used to have family here, you know. I really like this place, my mom said, smiling. The next morning, I made my way into the kitchen and was greeted with a warm smile and pancakes. As I sat down to eat, my mother must have noticed that I looked nervous and sat down next to me. Don't worry, you'll make friends here. I have a good feeling, she said. Looking back, I can't really understand how, after her husband left her, she could be so strong. I just hoped that I could have her kind of strength. I made my way down the path, just as we had practiced every night. When I arrived at school, a tall teacher with thick glasses greeted me at the door and helped me into the classroom. I sat down among 10 other students, and the teacher began to speak about what the year was going to be like and what we would learn. No one was mean to me or anything, but no one really spoke to me either. All the kids were so busy talking about their costumes for Halloween that they barely even noticed the new kid in there. There was this one little girl, though, that said hello. She sat 2 rows back from the other children, and I figured that maybe she was new to the school as well. She was very pretty with brown hair and glasses, and as I glanced back, she caught my gaze and gave me a big smile. I tried to smile back, but she was so pretty that it was hard to not be shy. Turning back around, I tried to listen to the teacher, but I was really just thinking about her. School ended for the day about 3 o'clock. I grabbed my bag and rushed outside toward the path to my house, very anxious to run home and tell my mom about the pretty girl that had smiled at me. Hurrying home down the path, I suddenly tripped over something and fell hard, scraping my knee. Sitting up to examine my injury, I looked back and see what had made me stumble. I saw the biggest crow I've ever seen. Strange, too. What was wrong with its eyes? As I made my way closer to examine it, I heard someone behind me. Hello! I know you from school, she said. Surprised, I looked up quickly and I see the pretty girl from class. Wondering if she had seen me fall, I was embarrassed and got to my feet quickly. My knee hurt pretty bad, though, but I was more worried about how I looked to her. Yeah, I think I saw you today in class too. My name is Jimmy, I said. Smiling back, she replied, I'm Margaret. We walked together down the trail. How's your leg? She asked. Oh, it's okay, I said, trying to act tough. You live down here too, huh? She told me that her family had lived in this town for some time and that she had also had a path behind her home leading through the forest to the school. We were instantly friends. As we got to my house, she surprised me by asking, Can I see what's in your house? What is it like? You make it sound so nice. I quickly smiled and knocked on my front door. My mom answered, very surprised to see Margaret next to me. Smiling, she said, Well, we don't waste time making friends, do you, Jim? Are you going to introduce the young lady or just stand there? My face turned red and I muttered out, This is Margaret. She lives around here and we met at school today. Trying not to show my excitement, I acted cool, or at least I think I did. She wanted to come over, I said. Hello, ma'am. I wanted to see your house. My family lives here too. Margaret smiled and said, Come on in, dear. I just this instant finished baking cookies, my mom replied. As the 3 of us sat around the kitchen table talking, we got on the subject of Halloween. What are you going as, Margaret? My mom asked. I'm going to be a witch this year. I heard they're really scary, Margaret said. Witches aren't scary, I quickly stated. Smiling again, Margaret corrected herself. Well, I'm going to go as a witch, but my family is out of town this weekend, and well, I don't really have a place to stay yet. It's a business trip, and they said I'm too young to go with them. They asked my regular babysitter, but she got sick yesterday, and now... My mom interrupted her. Well, if it's all right with your parents, you would be more than welcome to stay over here for the weekend and go trick-or-treating with us. It was at that moment I realized that I literally had the best mom in the world. What do you think, Jim? My mom asked, holding back a smile. Yeah, that's a great idea, I said. My mom drove Margaret home to meet her parents and asked them permission for her to stay over at our home for the weekend. When my mom got back, I asked her how it went. It went great, my mom said. I think her mother and aunt take care of her. They live in a beautiful little cottage down the trail. They invited me in and talked for quite a while. Both of them thought it was a great idea. I do have one question though. Do you have a crush on this girl? Pretending I didn't hear her, I quickly ran over to my room and closed the door. Got homework. Love you, I said, a little embarrassed. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then slowly my eyes began to focus. There was a tall man with long dark hair and a gray beard. His eyes were piercing and focused. They stared, unblinking out the window. My body started to tremble in fear. I hid under my blankets pretending it wasn't real and praying that he hadn't seen me. Peeking out from under, I almost screamed out of terror. He was just floating there, holding a huge axe with what looked like blood on it. I wanted to scream and run out of the room, but I was frozen. I couldn't make a sound. I don't know how I fell asleep, but when I woke the next day, it was gone, and it was like it never happened. I wanted to tell my mom, but I just couldn't for some reason. I don't know why. The week went by quickly, except for every single night, the man in my room would return, always holding the large axe in his hands. Some nights he would just peer out the window, and other nights he would pace back and forth. I could see his mouth move, but no words came out. I watched him in fear and awe. And the night before Halloween, he finally turned his head and looked directly at me. He locked his eyes with mine, and he took a step forward. I pulled my blankets over my head and started to shake in fear. Was this real? Was I going crazy? Then Halloween came, and I almost told Margaret about the man in my house. I felt guilty for not telling her, but I was afraid she would think I was crazy or something. And looking forward to this weekend was the only thing I had been happy about for some time. Margaret and I went house to house that night. I tried to have a good time, but wondered what was going to happen tonight when she stayed at my house. Would the man come again? Would he see her? She asked me what was wrong, and I pretended it was nothing. As we got back to my house, my mom had prepared a sleeping space for us in the living room. Margaret was going to sleep on the couch, and I had a blanket spread out on the floor. We compared candy, both agreeing we were tired. My mom was sleeping in the next room and told us to wake her if we needed her for anything. That night, as Margaret and I went to sleep, the wind started to howl against the windows. I told myself that I had never seen the man outside my room, and I thought we would be safe here. I felt guilty, but it was just so nice having a friend with me at night. I couldn't face him again alone. The storm became louder and louder as the clock struck midnight. Staring at the ceiling, I was starting to become more tired when I heard Margaret ask, "Jimmy, are you awake?" "I'm up," I said. "I can't sleep. It's freezing. Do you have another blanket?" she asked. I told her I had one in my room, then froze, realizing that I had just said. I would have to go back to my room. Searching for any other option, I knocked on my mom's door for a blanket, but she didn't reply back. The storm was so loud that even knocking didn't wake her. I thought about yelling her name, but realized how childish it would be how childish it would look to Margaret. "Didn't you say you had a blanket in your room?" she asked again. I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, I'll get it for you." Opening the door slowly, I saw no sign of any ghost or monster. I held my breath and quickly ran in over to the far closet to find an extra blanket. Fumbling through my clothes, I paused as I heard the door close behind me. The wind now almost shook the house, and it took every ounce of my courage to turn around. There was no ghost, though. It was just Margaret. "Oh, it's just you," I said. Margaret smiled and replied, "Who were you expecting? The boogeyman?" It was then I noticed that something was off about her. As she locked the door behind her, I realized she was taller than before. Much taller. With the door closed, it was very dark in my room. But were her eyes red? I thought I could see two small red dots looking back from where her eyes should be. She laughed and softly said, "You shouldn't have let me in, Jimmy." "Margaret, this isn't funny," I stammered. "I find it very funny," she said. As she made her way across the room, I saw a large knife in her hand. The moon shone across her face, and what was an ounce of beautiful young girl was now an old, haggard-looking woman with a hideous smile on her face. "Want a hug, Jimmy?" she asked. I backed into the corner of my room and screamed out for my mother. "She can't hear you, Jimmy." "She's never going to hear you," Margaret said. Having nowhere to go, I watched her get closer and closer. I was so scared now that I couldn't even move. All I could do was watch as she lifted the knife over her head and smiled wickedly. What happened next I will remember for the rest of my life. Before she could bring the knife down, something caught her gaze. She looked over towards the window and sunk back in fear. She screamed out and fell to the floor, trying desperately to run. But he stopped her. Holding on with one hand, the tall man brought down the axe on her neck. She screamed in agony and fear, her neck now half off as she still tried to crawl away. Placing his foot down roughly on her back, he pinned her to the floor. He then brought the axe down again, harder, with both hands, severing her neck almost entirely. There was a strong pull and then a grisly ripping sound. I heard a horrible pop as the man pulled her head completely off her body. All I could do was watch as he opened the window and carried her body and her head out into the forest. Stunned, I looked out. I could barely see, yet I just stood there and watched until he disappeared completely. I tried waking my mom, but she couldn't. She couldn't seem to hear as I shouted at her name. After I checked to see if she was safe, I went back into my room and just stood there at the window. I think I was in some kind of shock. After a while, I heard the door open. Running over to her, I hugged her close. It was my mom. "Good morning. Did you two have fun last night?" she asked, seemingly having heard nothing. At a loss for words, I slowly just nodded my head. "Tell Margaret that breakfast will be ready in 2 shakes. Is she still asleep on the couch?" my mom asked. I replied, mumbling something about her mom already having picked her up. Then my mom went into the kitchen to start breakfast. I wondered what I would have said if her parents did actually show up to collect her. In the unlikely event that her parents were human, they would probably be thankful she was gone. That year was the start of a new chapter in my life. I now knew that demons, witches, ghosts, evil things weren't just fairy tales. They were real. I'm older now and I have a family of my own. My son was born just a few months back and I never spoken a word of any of this to my wife. I never found the right moment to tell her. One last thing. A few days after Halloween as a child, my mom had taken a photo album and sat down next to me. I watched as she casually thumbed through the photos, and then I stopped her. "Who is that man?" I asked. "Him? That's your great-grandfather," she replied. I stared at the photo. It was him. I slept better after that. I would still see him from time to time staring out my window into the darkness. Margaret wasn't the last evil thing I would come across, and I now worried about the safety of my newborn son. It's Halloween night as I stand over my son's crib and stare out into the shadows of the forest beyond. I can feel something coming for us. But they don't know one thing. We weren't alone. And that is the ending of that fabulously creepy tale. Quite honestly, I believe that Margaret was far more creepy before she turned into the old hag. Children can be like that sometimes. Ah yes, Star King, welcome to the stream. Audio is fine? That is good to know. Thank you very much. We've actually made some adjustments to our audio equipment here, and we should be coming in far louder and more clear this time, hopefully. You can never really tell with technology these days. Now let's move on to our next creepy tale. Now let's see what I have for you. Ah yes, here we go. This also coming from Creepypasta. The story is called The Murphy Horror House, written by Kelly Foster. So, let's begin. Living in the town of Finlay, you hear a lot of urban legends, scary stories and rumors, usually conjured up to convince the young kids to behave and not to stay out past their bedtimes. As I understand it, it wasn't always this way. We moved to this town 2 months ago, in mid-August, and immediately became apparent that Finley took this time of year really seriously. Apparently, it's coming up to 2 years almost to the day since a small string of seemingly random murders occurred here, all over the course of a week. All the flags in town are lowered to half-mast, and candles and flowers have been plied in front of the memorial to victims in the town square. My mother and I haven't paid this much mind. It's sad, sure, but we have just been busy trying to acclimate ourselves to the new surroundings. Last Saturday afternoon, we spent a few hours pursuing the garage sales in our neighborhood, looking for antiques and interesting Halloween decorations. We came upon a yard that was rather sparse in our offerings. They had some cardboard boxes and books, a rack of old clothes, and an interesting-looking scarecrow sitting in a chair by the house. It had a sign tacked to its threadbare overalls, $5. Intrigued, I made my way over to it and was examining it with interest when a teenager approached me, also looking like at a scarecrow. She seemed really nervous and wouldn't take her eyes off the thing. "Hi, do you live here?" I asked, gesturing to the house. "This is a really cool scarecrow, super vintage." She shook her head furiously. "No, I live down the street. I just wanted to... You're new here, right? New to town?" I nodded, a puzzled smile on my face. "Yeah, why?" You shouldn't buy that scarecrow, okay? You should just leave it be. Haven't you heard the story?" she said in a hushed voice. I glanced back at my mother, who was browsing through the boxes of books, sending her "help me" eyes in case the girl was a little unhinged. No, what story?" She leaned in and proceeded to tell me the story that I had transcribed before, that I had transcribed below to the best of my ability. The Murphy family prided themselves on a few important aspects of their modest, middle-class, Midwestern life. They rooted for their hometown football team even when they were playing awful, which was most of the time. They insisted on eating dinner together as a family at least 5 nights per week, with no cell phones allowed at the table. And every year, they constructed the best Halloween yard display in the entire town. It was something Jack's grandparents had begun with him and his siblings when they were still small, and he grew up knowing that he would show his own kids The joy of spending a month setting up fake coffins filled with rubber mummies and half-decomposed zombies. After the family dinner, but before it started to get dark, they would haul in the props and decorations from their storage shed and began the painstaking process of arranging them in the expansive front yard. Gallons of fake blood would be spilled and countless bags of fluffy spider webs would be stretched across every tree and bush. Over decades of improvements, the display had gone from a small cluster of foam headstones with a few green hands protruding from the ground into a massive fenced-off haunted experience, complete with fog machines and sound effects. The surrounding neighborhoods come to expect this wonderful horror and looked forward to it. Watching the Murphys begin to build it on October 1st and excitedly standing in line to tour it on Halloween night. Lana, the youngest Murphy child, had even made their modest Facebook page to attract more attention. The spooky tour itself took roughly 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how quickly the groups moved across the yard. The display was arranged with only one entrance and one exit. It was barricaded on all sides, so the only way to escape was to finish walking through it, much like any traditional haunted house. The three kids took turns dressing up as voodoo dolls, murder victims, or demonic clowns to jump out from behind the various props to terrify their visitors. At the end of the tour, everyone would receive their fair share of candy and orange pumpkin spice stickers that read, "I survived the Murphy Horror House," followed by the respective year. A great time was always to be had by all, and Jack felt pride in knowing he was making his late grandparents proud. The display was vary slightly from year to year, depending on the latest and scariest props that Daisy, Jack's wife, had either scavenged from after Halloween sales last season or created from scratch. A group of witches huddled over a cauldron might end up on the tour rather than the traditional chainsaw-wielding madman. The gravedigger might be on the left side rather than the right to accommodate creepier additions. As props were added, so were inevitably retired. Countless years of sitting in the elements had begun to wear them down. But one part of the display would never change. Not if Jack had anything to say about it. In the very center of the tour, illuminated by green and orange spotlights and hung askew on a rugged cross-like post, was the Scarecrow. Jack made that Scarecrow himself when he was 11 years old. Together with his father, he gathered the hay and bits of old fabric necessary to bring it to life, and it had appeared in the display ever since. The burlap sack that comprised the Scarecrow's face was tattered and full of moth holes, but it still bore a signature crooked smile, stitched in black yarn and curled up a bit too far on either side. It wore an old straw hat, a denim work shirt that once belonged to his father, patched overalls, and a pair of dusty boots. Its hair was an unruly black wig that Jack's mother had found in the garage sale, sticking out from under its hat in all directions, and its eyes were painted on, dark red triangles sunken into its face. The Scarecrow was always the first to go up when the display construction began, and the last to come down, in an almost ceremonial fashion. It was the centerpiece of the whole production, even if most of the trick-or-treaters didn't find it scary anymore. Not compared to the more modern, detailed props, Jack didn't care. The Scarecrow ruled over the yard like a king, reminding everyone of where the tradition began. That year, it was a week before Halloween and the display was almost complete. Lana, Ryan, and Trevor had long since given up on decorating and were inside, busy arguing over who would get to dress up as Jason from Friday the 13th. Jack was doing what he always did as the big night drew closer, walking the whole display over and over, checking to see that everything worked and nothing should be tweaked. The sun had sunk below the horizon and Daisy was calling him to come in, but Jack insisted on one last stroll with a flashlight in hand. Rolling her eyes at her obsessive husband, Daisy relented and retreated inside to stop her children from killing each other over the costume. Jack entered through the stone gate at the entrance of the tour, and followed the path as it wound back and forth through the yard. Occasionally, he would stop to scoop a rubber rat out of the walkway, with his shoe, or arrange the bloody vampire so its eyes caught the light a bit better. In general, all seemed to be in order. The excitement of knowing it was almost showtime put a skip in Jack's step. He came around the corner to where the scarecrow set up, and at first, he thought his eyes had been playing tricks on him in the dim light. The spotlights that usually illuminated the scarecrow were turned off. That in itself was odd, as all the lights were on the same circuit, and the other lights were still blazing around it. Even in the shadowy darkness, it quickly became apparent that the wooden cross that had held up his friend was empty. "Daisy!" Jack bellowed, spinning in circles and shining his flashlight in every which way to catch the thief. Daisy poked her head out the front door. "You rang?" she replied, with more exasperation than concern. "The scarecrow! It's gone! Someone took it!" Jack shouted. He was now sprinting towards the end of the maze, checking behind every grave and looking in the front and back of his old hearse. He was sure someone was still lurking inside the display, snickering at his distress. "I'm sure nobody took it, dear. You probably just left it somewhere," Daisy sighed. Jack ran up to her, panting in exertion. "You know it was the first thing I put up. I saw it less than 20 minutes ago. It was there the last time I walked the maze," he protested, still shining the flashlight around and behind the porch in the dark stillness of the yard. Nothing else seemed amiss. "It's just some neighborhood kids playing a trick on you. I'm sure they'll bring it back. We'll arm the alarm system tonight before bed," Daisy replied, taking her husband by the elbow and gingerly guiding him inside. She didn't completely understand his fixation with the scarecrow, but she hadn't seen him this upset in quite some time. "Okay," he said in a huff, clearly not placated. And that was what they did. The alarm system covered the entire yard from the end to the driveway and back to the house. It was a simple motion activation number. Anything larger than a squirrel would set it off, with blaring sirens and flashing lights. Because of this, they only ever armed it during the month of October, and only for the 2 weeks leading up to Halloween when most of the expensive props were being put out. They had been working abruptly more than once in the past years because someone's dog got loose and triggering it by accident. That night, however, the alarm did not go off, and in the morning Jack awoke bright and early from his restless sleep. He ran to the bedroom window and peered down. The room was on the second floor and overlooked the front yard. Stunned, he could plainly see even from the distance that the scarecrow was back on his post. His head was even drooping slightly to the right, just as he had left it that night before. How was this possible? Jack asked anxiously as they made breakfast later that morning and prepared to usher the kids off to school. Daisy shrugged, more focused on packing lunch than their conversation. "Maybe you were mistaken. You said yourself the spotlights were off." "No, I know what I saw." "How did he get the scarecrow back on his post in the middle of the night without triggering the alarms?" he demanded. It was baffling to him. The scarecrow was as big as a full-grown man and unwieldy to carry. He always needed his eldest son Ryan to help hanging on the post, and he considered himself fairly fit. It must have taken at least 2 people to remove it and put it back, maybe 3 if they were young teenagers. Yet none of them have heard a thing. Daisy stuffed a bagel in his mouth and handed him his coffee. "Maybe their alarm system is faulty. We haven't used it in a year. I can have someone out and look at it tomorrow. Don't worry so much about it, Jack. You got what you wanted. It's back, isn't it?" she reminded him. He was about to argue with her further when the sound of the morning news distracted them both. Lana turned up the volume on the TV in the living room and the rest of the family slowly congregated around it. Tragedy struck in Finlay a late night when 12-year-old Marley Greenberg was found murdered in her bed. We're still receiving details, but it appears she was, at this point, There was a pause, and the newscaster swallowed thickly, his expression deeply uncomfortable. Disemboweled. Several of her internal organs are missing. There was no sign of forced entry, and the police are investigating the entire Greenberg family. Findlay PD had declined to offer any interviews, and the family asked for privacy during this difficult time. In shock and horror, Jack reached for the remote, taking it from Lana and changing the channel before the news story could continue. "Oh my God!" Daisy cried, her hands flying to her lips and her eyes welling with tears. "I know Marla. She's in Trevor's class. Oh, her poor parents. For all you know, her poor parents are the ones that killed her," Ryan said with no small amount of snark. Trevor nodded in agreement, forever mimicking his older brother. Alana just rolled her eyes. Daisy shushed them, still fighting back tears. Jack was also thoroughly shaken by the news, although he tried not to show it. Nothing like this has ever happened in the city. There were mostly happy, pleasant people here. The strange events from the previous nights combined with the latest development to add to the heavy sense of unease that was building in his gut. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. They hurried the kids off to school with multiple reminders to be careful and hurry home. As soon as the bus drove off down the street, Jack called the alarm company and scheduled maintenance for the following afternoon. Whatever was going on, nobody was going to set foot in his yard again without him knowing it. That night it took Jack hours to fall asleep. The kids had all come home from school raving about Marla Greenberg's murder and spouting several theories their friends had told him. Try as he might to change the subject at dinner, it was all any of them wanted to talk about. Jack supposed he understood. Marla had been their age. They must be frightened there that something might happen to them too. The creepy time of year did nothing to help the situation. It all fled right into their mountain Halloween hysteria. After spending hours tossing and turning in bed, mulling over it in their mind, he decided to give up and get a glass of water from the kitchen. As he rose from bed and passed by the bedroom window, something outside caught his eye. He hurried over to look down into the yard, rubbing his eyes to make sure he was actually seeing what he thought he was seeing. The scarecrow was gone again. His hands gripped the windowsill tightly. His knuckles turned white. It was everything he could do not to wake Daisy. He knew she would write it off as another neighborhood prank, cite the broken alarm system as the culprit, and assure him that it would be fixed the next day. The straps that held the scarecrow on his post were loose and waving gently in the nighttime breeze, and he could barely make out any bits of the hay leading off the direction of the exit. Part of him wanted to sit in the front porch with a baseball bat and wait for the intruders to return, in case they decided to steal other crops from them. But something about the whole situation gave him pause. Why would they bring the scarecrow back only to steal it again? Were they just messing with them? What were they doing with it? It didn't feel right. Reluctantly, he retrieved his glass of water and tried to go back to sleep. But this time he cracked the window open just a few inches to better hear what was going on in the yard. He slept facing it. Just woke hours later to the sun streaming in and Daisy shaking him roughly by the shoulder. Bewildered, he blinked his sleepy eyes open and stared up at her face. She looked extremely pale and she had clearly been crying. "Jack, this happened again," she said quietly, her throat tight. "Come downstairs." Not fully awake and barely understanding what she meant, he got up and reached for his bathrobe. In his haste, he forgot to glance out the window. The TV was blaring when he entered the living room. The kids were poised in a semicircle around it, frozen in place like statues as they watched the news story unfold. In a shocking turn of events, the second murder has taken place in Findlay roughly 24 hours after the first. The scene at 13-year-old Danielle LeBleu bedside was equally grisly, according to Findlay PD. This time, the boy's heart and lungs were missing. Jack's own heart sunk into his stomach at these words. The image on the scene showed on the screen showed crime scene tape crisscrossing the Lebuel's front door as paramedics loaded the uncovered body in the back of the ambulance. Possibly more horrifyingly of all, they lived only 2 streets over from the Murphys. The Greenbirds at least lived on the other side of town. This was getting too close for comfort. Again, no sign of forced entry was found, and the police are now convinced that this was the work of an organized, highly stealthy, and sadistic killer. Finley had decided to enforce a mandatory curfew of 9 p.m. for all children under 18 until the perpetrator has been brought to custody. Daisy switched the TV off. This time, none of the kids cracked jokes or even moved a muscle. Lana was quietly crying and trying to hide it. "Dad, is someone going to kill us too?" Trevor asked with his wide eyes, craning his head up to look at his father. Jack put a firm hand on his boy's head. "No, Trev. I would never let anything happen to you guys." "Jack, maybe we should keep them home from school today," Daisy said weakly. She looked like she might pass out. Jack shook his head. "No. We don't want to put our lives on hold because some psycho is trying to scare everyone. That's just letting him win. The police are doing their jobs. We need to do ours. Guys, do you want to stay home?" 3 heads shook slowly from side to side. Most likely they would feel safer in school, surrounded by plenty of adults and security supervision, not to mention all of their friends. "Okay, now let's get ready." No sooner had the words left his mouth than he thought he caught movement from his peripheral vision. Something was outside. He approached the picture window that faced the front yard and pushed the curtains further apart, expecting to see a bird or someone walking their dog. Everything was perfectly still in the Halloween display. Everything was as it should be. The Scarecrow, he was no longer surprised to see, was once again back on his post, smiling merrily at the morning mist. Later that day, as the alarm system repairman wandered around their property, checking on all the motion sensors and wiring, Jack took another stroll through the display and he came to a stop in front of the Scarecrow. He stared up at it, hands on his hips, brow furrowed deeply in thought. He had taken the day off work to be there when the maintenance guy came home, and he was spending some time trying to logically work through what could be happening on his property. He hadn't yet told Daisy about the Scarecrow's latest disappearance act. He wanted to solve the puzzle on his own, and he knew her answer would be, it was just a dream. If the alarm system had been broken for 2 days, he supposed it was possible that a few other kids had snuck into the yard and moved the Scarecrow. He must have moved quickly, especially at night. It disappeared and reappeared again within the span of 3 hours, by his estimation. Odd that, even with the windows open, he didn't hear them working. The straps that held his arms and wrists to the post were literally nailed into the wood, so they would have needed to pull out the nails and then replace them afterwards. How could they have not heard something of any kind of hammering outside? He walked a bit closer to the Scarecrow, examining it. Something was off about it. He could see it now that he was up close. It seemed fuller than it usually was. Over many years, straw and stuffing had fell out of it and swollen out of his torso and his limbs, and the kids had diligently packed it back every other season or so. But even with occasional fixes, it was always rather slim. Now its chest and stomach seemed robust and as if it had been generously restuffed. He almost chuckled to himself. What was he really suggesting here? That some kids were stealing the Scarecrow just to, what, refill it? Make it look nicer? It was a ridiculous notion. Daisy or someone had obviously come on and stuffed it a bit more last night before they went to bed. Sighing, Jack gave the old Scarecrow a pat on the leg and went to meet the alarm company guys at the other end of the yard. They were finishing up their assignment. Ah, Mr. Murphy, the lead worker said. He was scratching his head as he handed Jack the clipboard with some data and some forms to sign. Strangest thing. As far as we can tell, your alarm system is perfectly working in order. Jack froze, pen in hand. What do you mean? I mean, it works. Just fine as it always has. We can test it to show you. Yes, please do. I need to know that it works, Jack interrupted, becoming somewhat hysterical now. So he did. They took turns walking to various parts of the yard with the system armed, and sure enough, it was quickly set off each time. They disarmed it immediately after every test so that not to cause an uproar to neighbors. Jack insisted they try walking through the display itself up to the scarecrow, just to be sure. They didn't even make it halfway before the sirens blared off and the lights flashed. It doesn't make sense, Jack said under his breath after a solid half hour of testing the alarm. Could the intruders possibly be disarming it and then arming it again when they leave? He asked the workers. He was now desperate to find an answer, any kind of answer. Their leader shook his head. They need the passcode and access to the remote. There's no evidence that the system had been tampered with. He paused. Mr. Murphy, nothing is officially missing from your property, correct? He was looking at Jack with a suspicious side eye that clearly indicated that he was concerned of the man's mental health. Well, no, I mean, not right now, but then I wouldn't worry. If you have any other concerns, don't hesitate to call us again. That evening, as Jack was helping Daisy prepare dinner and trying to figure out a way to discuss everything he had learned on that day with her, he overheard the children gossiping among themselves in the living room. I heard that they didn't just take Danny's heart and lungs. They took some of his skin, too. Trevor was just saying to Ryan and Lana. Shut up, that's gross, and it's not true, Lana retorted matter-of-factly. Well, my friend Christina lives a few houses down from them, and her sister Tasha said that the police found pieces of what looked like hay in and around the bodies, Ryan chimed in. So, they were killed by a horse? Trevor asked with a frown. Or crows, Ryan replied. This made Lana giggle. Guys, enough, Daisy snapped. She left the kitchen to gather them for dinner. Jack hadn't moved an inch the entire time he's been listening to his kids' conversation. He had seen bits of hay recently himself, hadn't he? Hay and straw. Small piles of it leading out of his yard when the scarecrow was taken. Could their disappearing crop and the two grisly murders be connected somehow? Was the person who committed these heinous crimes also sneaking into the yard at night? It had to be a coincidence. It had to be just a coincidence. Still, his blood ran cold at the thought. That night, after the security system was armed, Daisy and the kids were fast asleep. Jack sat up on the front porch with his flashlight in one hand and a metal baseball bat in the other. Bundled up against the chilly October air, he made sure to sit back in the shadows where he wouldn't be noticed, and he kept his flashlight switch off. This time, he was going to see who or what was moving the scarecrow, and he was going to call the police. He just had to catch them in the act to prove that he wasn't going crazy. Hours passed in stillness and silence. It was getting even colder, and Jack grabbed a blanket he had brought outside with him, wrapping it around his shoulders. Nothing in the yard was stirring. The props were all as they were as he left them, casting haunted silhouettes in the grass in the moonlight. From where he sat, he could make out most of the scarecrow's hat poking out of the center of the display, and a few tufts of its fuzzy black wig. He kept his eyes trained on it, the minutes ticking away. Jack! A blood-curdling scream split the night and snapped Jack out of his slumber. He had dozed off in his chair. At first, he thought he had dreamt of his wife's cry for help, but then it came again, from inside the house. Jack tumbled up to turn on the flashlight and pointed at Scarecrow with shaking hands. It was gone. He leapt up off the porch, triggering the alarm with ear-splitting purr, peal and drowned out Daisy's screams. He sprinted closer to the display, shining the light up and over into the center of. But now, he was certain. The Scarecrow was definitely missing, and piles of straw led away from the post. Away to the left and past where he stood. Past him. Across the porch. And through their open front door. The screams mixed with the deafening siren of the alarm created total chaos as Jack flew through the door and up the stairs. His feet barely touched the floor. Following Daisy's voice, he pounded down the hallway and towards their bedroom. He tried to hold his hands to his ears and blocking out the alarm, but they still had a death grip on his baseball bat and his flashlight. He wasn't sure, but he thought her cries were coming from Trevor's room. He arrived at the open bedroom door just as Daisy's strangled yells were silenced and were quickly replaced by his own. There, crouched over Trevor's piled and mangled body, was the Scarecrow. Daisy was slumped over on the floor behind it, the kitchen knife still in her limp hand, as if she tried and failed to defend her son. The Scarecrow ever so slowly paused and turned to look at Jack, who was still standing in the doorway, with his mouth agape and his whole body shaking. His head was illuminated by the beam of Jack's flashlight. The straw hat and black hair were all too familiar. But now, instead of burlap and string, it was wearing Trevor's face, distorted and bloodied face. His skin, its smile far too wide, and with Trevor's mouth, it said, "Trick or treat." By the time the girl was done telling me this tale in magnificent detail, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon and the garage sale was closing up in shop at night. I grinned at her and thanked her for the entertainment. I guess it's true what they say about small towns being full of colorful characters. I promptly bought the Scarecrow from the lady who was selling it. Who could resist with a crazy story like that? Totally perfect for the season. It's in the garage at the moment, but I'm going to set it up in our porch next day, maybe tomorrow night, alongside our freshly picked pumpkins. I really feel like it'll pull this whole Halloween vibe together. And that is the end of that tale. That's another reason never to go to the garage sale, I suppose. But then again, who could pass up such deals? Thank you very much for the diamond, Shaolin. It is very much appreciated, and will definitely help support this channel and these streams. And thank you for the lemons, Shadowlance and Turrell07. We always appreciate your donations. And now we have just one more tale, one more fabulously creepy tale to tell. This one is also from Creepypasta. It is called Charles Bonnet Syndrome, written by S.P. Hickey. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. It's hard to tell sometimes. And this will be our final tale for tonight. So, I'll give you just a small moment to head out, grab a drink or a snack, use the restroom if you need to so you don't miss even a second of this terrifying tale. Go on, shoot. I'll be waiting right here. Are you all done now? Well, let us continue the tale. So let's begin. The Charles Bonnet Syndrome. I suffer from a condition called Charles Bonnet Syndrome, or visual release hallucinations, if you want to get more technical. It's a condition that's far more common than you might realize. It's estimated that as many as half the people who gradually lose their vision will experience one or more bouts over their lifetime. Yet I'm willing to bet most of you have never heard of it. Let's see. Just in time for that last one? Yes, little tree, you made it just in perfect time. Star King, the fear that has a hold on me. Well, I am wonderfully excited that you are getting properly horrified. The reason for that is because most sufferers are scared to tell anybody what we experience. I know I was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Andrew, and I'm 26. 2 years ago, I woke up with awful blurred vision. Every single edge and detail clouded as if somebody had smeared Vaseline on the camera lens. It never got better. I was scared then. I got over to Dr. Harper's surgery as fast as I could, suddenly needing to take a cab rather than climb in the car I'd driven without incident ever since I bought it 3 years prior. The doctor did some tests, asked me some questions. Have you been much thirstier lately? How often have you urinated? How would you describe your tiredness levels? And then gave me a diagnosis that changed my life forever. Diabetes. Type 1. He explained that I would need to take insulin shots with every meal and that eating the wrong foods without monitoring my blood sugar could see me drop in a coma or worse. Then he got to my eyes. Andrew, your diabetes have resulted in maculopathology. I know I mispronounced that one. Do you know what that is? I shook my head dumbly, already reeling with the shock of my diagnosis, and Dr. Hopper went on. It's when the diabetes affects the blood vessels at the back of your eye, blocking them and causing them to leak into the macula, the central part of the retina, and helps you to perceive color and fine detail. When these blood vessels leak into the macula, it can cause sufficient damage. With a lump in my throat, I asked, okay, so how do we make this better? I couldn't see Harper's face properly when he spoke, but his tone of voice was enough to tell me what I've been dreading. I'm sorry, Andrew, he replied gravely. Perhaps if we caught this a little sooner, we might have had some treatment options available to us. But I'm afraid the damage has been pretty extensive. We can take steps to arrest the development of this condition, but I'm afraid it's irreversible. I felt as if my world had come to crashing down around me. I was just 24, still at my physical peak. I was active, playing basketball and cycling a couple times a week. And now my health, my body and my sight have been taken away from me. The first 6 months were tough. I broke up with my girlfriend, a sweet girl called Holly, who tried to make it work but couldn't because I was so damn angry all the time. I lost my job because if there's one thing an architect's need, is his eyes. I even fell out with a lot of my friends, making excuses to not meet up with them until they just stopped asking. In truth, it was jealousy on my part. Envy that they got to keep living while everything I had hoped for had just been snatched away. I became a recluse, never leaving my apartment, barely bothering to wash, shave, or even get dressed. I was so sure that my life was over, I stopped even trying to live it. I was such an asshole. It took me a long time to realize this, but in the end, it was a nurse assigned to visit me at home, a tall, no-nonsense experienced woman called Lois, who brought this to my attention. You're an asshole, she said. What? I gasped, shocked at her language. So you got diabetes. Do you know how many people do? She asked. Then, before waiting for an answer, she continued. Do you think they all hide in their apartments, refusing to get on with their lives? Losing your vision is a terrible thing to do, and you have my sympathy, but Andrew, it's no excuse to give up. But you don't, I argued, trying to defend myself, but she hadn't finished. Understand? She growled. One of the bravest men I know was paralyzed from the neck down when he was just a child, and he hasn't given up. You can do so much more of your life, and you have people that want to help you. Do you know that? But you can't even be bothered to shave that ugly face of yours. Stop being a crybaby. and make a difference. Of course it didn't happen overnight, and I argued with her. I was furious at her blunt insensitivity and told her to leave. I said I'd tell her superiors, but she laughed and told me I wouldn't. You won't, because you're a smart guy and you've got too much pride for that, she said. I'll see you next week. That night I shaved. I opened my curtains and actually looked around. Things were blurry, but when I really looked, I could see the things scattered around my home. The mess I'd let it become. When Lois came back the following week, the place was tidy. I was clean-shaven, dressed, and even attempted to comb my hair. She didn't say anything about it, didn't mention the argument about the week before. But she took me out for coffee down the street. She guided me along the sidewalk to the coffee shop, talking to me, reassuring me. It was daunting, even though it was less than a block away, but I felt so proud when I got there. We talked, me and Lois. I think I even laughed. Afterwards, she walked me home. Then, when she helped me back inside, she said, "It's nice to meet you at last, Andrew." That day was the beginning of my new life. I moved to a new apartment, a ground floor place, and joined a group of other young people with visual impairments. I made friends. I got out. Every day, even if it was just a short walk. But I made a point of seeing what I could in the world. I bought what I could, but the Sawyers, the old couple that ran the local store, would bring me groceries once a week. Clark's a gruff old coot, so he refused to coddle me, and he told me that he respects me for being like what I am, for maintaining my independence, for not giving up. From a guy like him, that's one of the sweetest things I've ever heard. Things were going so well, and then, 1 year ago, it started. I walked into my living room, a mug of coffee in my hand, and I saw a Victorian funeral carriage stood right there on my rug, complete with two huge, proud horses in full livery, adorned with long black plums in their bridles. They stood perfectly still, while the driver, a small bearded man in period costume and a top hat, fidgeted with the reins and peered at me expectantly. Bizarrely, they were far clearer than the usual blurry shapes that I could see. I damn near pissed my pants. I dropped the cup, spilling the scalding hot coffee over my bare feet, jumping backwards with a cry of pain and alarm. When I returned my attention to the horses and carriage back in the room, they were gone. At that moment, I wondered if I was going mad. Apparently, most of us do, which is understandable. How would you feel if you could see that exact same sight in your home? Unless you're Jack the Ripper, I imagine many of you do not have a coach and horses just laying around. I certainly didn't. Eventually, after much quiet swearing to myself, and more than a little self-delusion, I managed to convince myself that what I had seen, what I thought I saw, that it was merely a very vivid daydream. This seemed to work, and I got on living, even if I entered the same room a little more cautiously in the days that followed. Finally, I just forgot about it. 2 weeks later, I saw a giant, floating, swirling orange ball in my bathroom. I damn near pissed myself again. I stood staring at it, this bizarre, rotating, levitating globe that was a little larger than a beach ball hanging in the middle of my tub. Open mouth for a full 10 seconds before I finally, screwing my eyelids tightly, closed and whispered to myself, "That isn't there. That isn't there." After 5 seconds, I opened my eyes again, and it wasn't there. Have you ever had cause to doubt your own sanity, to wonder whether what you perceived is truly there, or if your mind has betrayed you? Honestly, compared to the loss of my vision, the prospect of losing my mind was so much more terrifying. I fought against adversity and took pride in the fact that I am not just a survivor, but somebody who is living his own life. How could I do that if I was insane? I barely slept that night, and I remained jumpy for a few days afterward. Any sign of movement or any unfamiliar shape would set my pulse racing. It would cause me to doubt whatever was truly there. It was the toughest time I had ever been through, worse even than the time I was diagnosed with diabetes. At least when Dr. Harper had told me about diabetes, I had a definitive view, a definite view progress or prognosis. I was given facts by a medical professional. My affliction was physical. It had a name, and most important, it had a treatment plan. This was something else. My own mind had turned against me. My senses, my perception of reality had become twisted and unreliable. It's only when you're in that position that you realize just how terrifying it is. Your senses and the way in which your brain interprets them and is your only true defense against danger. You perceive danger and you avoid it, preventing your body from becoming harmed. But what happens when you can't trust your perception to alert you to the dangers that are truly there? Lois picked up the problem first, noticing my skittish manner. She asked what was wrong, if I needed to talk about anything, but I told her no. I was fine, but I hadn't been sleeping well. The last part was true. I hadn't been able to sleep a wink. Just the very thought of being institutionalized, spending the rest of my days in a sedated blue pajamas, clad zombies in a white room with only the echoing cries of my fellow inmates for company. It terrified me beyond measure. But what was the alternative? Live life at a risk of myself and to others? Ultimately, I chose to ignore it. I reasoned that if I was able to function around other people without them realizing what was going on, that was good enough. A full month passed before the next incident, and I really did think that maybe I put this whole mess behind me. With every passing day, my confidence had grown. So that Wednesday morning, I stepped out onto the sunny street feeling pretty carefree. Each Wednesday, I treat myself to a latte down at Joe's, the same coffee shop that I visited with Lois. It was a custom that gave me a great deal of pleasure, one that had seen me forge friendships with other regulars as well as the staff, including Joe himself. As I made my way down the street, white stick in hand, I glanced about me, taking in the colors and shapes of the world around me. I enjoyed the feel of the sun on my face and the sounds of the birds singing. It was a good day. Then I saw them. A party of pilgrims, 6 of them, all dressed in settler era attire, sitting cross-legged on the asphalt. They didn't look at me. Instead, they were engaging in a heated yet strangely silent conversation. I froze, staring at them. Still, they argued, gesticulated furiously at one another. However, I couldn't hear their angry voices despite the fact that, judging by their ill temperament, they must be screaming at one another. Paralyzed by shock, the white stick fell from my numb fingers, clattering onto the sidewalk. I turned to leave, desperate to flee from the haunting sight of the colonists on the road. But I was so panicked, in such a hurry, that I stepped on my cane. It rolled underfoot, and before I knew it, I pitched over, tumbled onto the ground hard below. I didn't quite break my fall in time, banging my cheek hard on the floor and skinning my palms. I heard the cry from the passerby, a friendly, concerned woman who rushed over to my side. She knelt beside me, helping me up, applying a Kleenex to my throbbing cheek, which she informed me was now bleeding. I tried to tell her that I was okay. There was nothing to worry about. But this good Samaritan insisted on driving me to Dr. Harper's office to get my injuries looked at. Now I think back to it, I'm pretty sure that she knew that I was in my obvious distress. It was nothing to do with the fall. At the time I was embarrassed and angry, but now I realize I owed her a debt of gratitude. Without her intervention, I don't know how much longer this would have gone on, before I cracked up and ended up in an asylum after breaking down through sheer stress. Andrew, why don't you tell me what happened? Dr. Hopper asked, gently dabbing my cheek with disinfectant. I explained that I just lost my balance, that no harm was done, but I think he saw through my feeble protestations and my underlying agitation. He didn't press or force the matter. He simply asked what might have caused the clumsiness. Then he asked how I'd been off lately. When I'd finished mumbling my way through the most non-committal answer I could muster, he placed a gentle, reassuring hand on my shoulder. Andrew, he repeated gently, why don't you tell me what happened? I burst into tears. I told him how scared I was, how I fought so hard for my independence, and now I knew it would be taken from me. He listened patiently, and then asked me to tell me why I ever thought that. I paused then, took a deep breath and thought about it. This was the point of no return. But really, what other option did I have? So, with tears down my cheeks, I told Dr. Hopper everything. I told him about the horse in the carriage, the orange globe, and the pilgrims. I told him how I'd been living each day in fear, how I was terrified that I was losing my mind. Dr. Hopper thought for a moment, and then he said, Andrew, I don't think you're losing your mind. The sense of relief at that moment was so powerful and overwhelming, rendering me speechless. You say that even though you're seeing these things, that you've never heard any noise from them. Have you detected any odors or experienced any other physical sensations such as touching them? I shook my head no, and he patted my shoulder once again. Andrew, have you heard of Charles Bonnet syndrome? He asked. Charles Bone who? I asked, confused by the sudden, unexpected turn of conversation. Okay, let me explain, Dr. Hopper said kindly. Charles Bonnet was a Swiss naturalist who was born in the 1700s. He discovered a curious condition in his elderly grandfather, who was nearly completely blind due to cataracts. The old man regularly experienced visual hallucinations, including random patterns and even people and places. Sound familiar? Yes, I replied, still confused. Am I suffering from dementia? No, Andrew, not at all, Dr. Hopper reassured me. Do you know how perception works? In layman's terms, your eyes take in light via the iris and pupil, which is then processed through the retina and translated into electrical signals, which is decoded by the brain, which simply organizes these signals into a recognizable image. With me so far? I nodded, finally starting to understand. When the retina becomes damaged, such as those that have undergone the special degradation, those signals become warped and jumbled, Dr. Hopper went on. The brain still receives them, so it does its job, translating these distorted signals into an image. It kind of fills in the gaps for you. Sometimes it fills in these gaps with colors, patterns, creatures, and places that aren't present. And this is what they call Charles Bonnet syndrome. I nearly wept with relief. So I'm not mad, I cried. Not at all, the doctor replied. This is an entirely physical condition. Your mind is in full working order. If you are suffering from any form of mental illness or delusion, it wouldn't be limited to just one sense. You'd hear those interlopers, smell them, even feel them. This is a condition solely related to your eyes, not your brain. As I left Dr. Hopper's office, I felt as if a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Sure, my vision was still an issue, but now I knew it was only a problem with my eyes, not my mind. I knew I could handle the situation. I was ready to face the world again. Since then, I've seen plenty of weird visions. I saw a huge waterfall in the park, complete with a hazy mist and butterflies flitting about it. I saw a Native American warrior complete with a huge feather headdress, sitting on a stool in the corner of a coffee shop. I saw an intricate and quite impossible structure of scaffolding crisscrossing the entire front of my apartment block. Hell, on the 4th of July last year, I even saw a great swooping green dragon in the sky, twisting and converting through the air overhead. All looked utterly and completely real, yet now I knew it was simply tricks of my eyes. They were no longer disturbing. In fact, I actually came to quite enjoy them. Even looking at them as unique and entertaining little shows of work of art that are exquisite purely for my pleasure and nobody else's. I came to welcome them. Then a month ago, I saw her. It was nighttime. It's always nighttime when I see her. And I was just getting ready for bed. I walked into the kitchen to get myself a glass of water and actually cried out in alarm when I spotted a figure in the corner. She was tall, by far the tallest woman I've ever seen. And even though she stood hunched, she still had at least 6 inches on me. I was used to seeing characters in dated and bizarre dresses, but this was different somehow. It didn't seem like an outfit from any other time. Instead, a bizarre mismatch of items. She wore a tuxedo jacket, figure hugging in black, tailored to the female body shape, over a dirty old ruffled dress shirt. To complete the ensemble, she wore a bright red bow tie. On her hands, which she held out on either side as shrugging, or maybe feeling for rain, she wore dirty white gloves. Her fingers were disproportionately long, almost spiderly, and occasionally they twitched, as if she longed to grip and squeeze something in them. On her lower half, she wore shorts, the same crimson as her bow tie, over opaque black nylons. Her legs were long, lithe, attractive, if truth to be told, the legs of a dancer. She also wore red heels, the same hue of her shorts and bow tie, but they sparkled and shimmered, bringing to mind Judy Garland's ruby stipplers from The Wizard of Oz. As strange as the symbol was, I couldn't tear my eyes from her face. Most of it obscured by the jaunty bowler hat, tipped and tilted to the side of her, tilted to hide her eyes and nose. Just beneath the brim of her hat, I could see the deathly pale skin of her face and a grin that sent shivers down my spine. It was wide, too wide, with entirely too much teeth. A smile is meant to be an expression of warmth. It's meant to feel welcoming and benevolent. But the look in this woman's face oozed malice. It felt much like the sort of glee I'd expect from a snake or the acid corners of a rat. However, the thing that startled me the most was that she had a third arm sprouting from her back, curled up and over her head like a scorpion tail. It was longer than any arm she should have. And the hand only had 3 fingers, like a claw. It was pointed straight at me, and I swore in dismay and stumbled sideways. It seemed to track my movement. I stood staring at the creepy figure for a few seconds, trying to get my head around the situation. She just stood there in the corner, grinning back. Finally, I realized that this was just another one of my hallucinations, and breathed an audible sigh of relief. One of the tricks I've picked up in the months of suffering from Charles Bonnet syndrome is to break the line of vision towards whichever stimulus is causing my brain to interrupt the image into the hallucination. Think of it like restarting a faulty computer. How refreshing the system debugs it. To this end, I closed my eyes and counted 5, then reopened them. The illusion is gone. So, as I stared at the horrifying malformed figure in the kitchen, I knew that to make the image go away, I simply had to close my eyes. I'll be honest here. When I counted to 5, I hesitated a little before opening them again. If I'd opened my eyes and she'd still be there, smiling that wicked smile at me, I think I might have a heart attack. She wasn't, though, and I breathed another long sigh of relief, fetched my glass of water, and went back to bed. The tall woman haunted my thoughts in the days after I saw her. She was different from the other visions I had. Somehow she felt more real. It was the agitation of my It was this agitation that my buddy Jason picked up on, and we met for lunch the following Friday. Jason was one of those same friends I tried to drive away shortly after I lost my vision. Yet, he refused to give up on me, continuing to get in touch with me every week. Good friends are hard to come by, but great friends, the ones who will be by your side for life, are even rarer. Jason, God bless his kind heart, was one of the latter. You got to tell me what's going on, dude, he said as we sat over the pizza. What do you mean? I asked, trying to brush it off. You're so distracted. It's like you're looking for something in here all the time. You've eaten like one slice of pizza in the time you've taken me to eat four? So, I repeat, you got to tell me what's going on, Jason said, waving a slice of pizza around for emphasis. It's nothing, I replied, feeling a little stupid. I just had a hallucination a couple of nights ago, and it really got to me. I thought you were cool with those now, he asked, putting the pizza slice down. Yeah, I am. I mean, I was. But this was different, I replied, resigned to talking about it. She scared me. She? Jason asked, his interest clearly piqued. Tell me about it. So I described, and I told him about the tall woman and how she appeared to me. I explained that unlike any of the other hallucinations, she felt more real, and that she was the first to feature such a weird and unsettling mutation. Sure, I'd seen versions of people in the past, a phenomenon referred to as Lilliputian by medical professionals, another word I know how to mispronounce. But the extra appendage and possibly distorted face were something I had yet to encounter thus far. I think it was that, combined with the unnerving, expectant stance, that had disturbed me the most. So, Jason said as I finished, you said she had great legs? Shut up, you asshole. I laughed, throwing my napkin at him. No, seriously, I get it, Jason replied, passing the napkin back to me. If I walked into a room and a giant mutant was waiting for me, it scared the crap out of me too. But you know what caused you to see this? It's like the coach bed and the waterfall you saw. It's a condition that you know that you have and that you've been dealing with, okay? I know, I replied. Thanks, man, you're right. I did feel better too, so I smiled at him. And I took a big bite of the pizza to change the subject. After asking him about his Psycho X, a conversation he was all too happy to dive into. The next time I saw the tall woman, just under a week later, I was brushing my teeth. I was stood at the wash basin, brushing away, when I spotted a figure in the mirror. She was out in the dark hallway, peeking around the door behind me. The same sinister grin I'd seen before, the stretching a narrow face into a distorted grimace. The dirty bowler hat pushed down over her eyes once again. Each of those three long, spidery hands gripped the door frame. As crazy as this sounds, it felt like she was trying to avoid being spotted. I cried out, spitting toothpaste foam all over the mirror. That toothbrush clattered to the basin. I spun around, my heart thumping in my chest, my breathing ragged in my throat. She wasn't there, of course. She wasn't. The doorway was empty. I tiptoed forward, hesitantly, trying to look around the door frame into the hallway without actually sticking my neck out into the shadowy confines. The seconds ticked by as I drew closer and closer. I couldn't see anything, so, finally, with a whisper of self-affirmation, I stepped out of the bathroom. The hallway was empty, as was with the rest of my apartment. I was shaken again. This was the first time I've seen the hallucination in the reflection, and I wasn't even sure that I've actually seen it. Now, as I sit here, writing this, knowing more to follow, I think I thought like that I tried to protect myself, to shield myself from the truth. I was an idiot. A full fortnight passed without incident. Sure, I saw a flash of color one day, A dancing yellow lightning bolt that zigzagged back and forth on the street outside my apartment. That was exactly the sort of thing I'd come to expect with my condition. It was exciting, otherworldly, but it wasn't scary. Not like she was. In retrospect, that fortnight was blissful. It was a reminder of what life could be like, the existence that I've carved out for myself since my diagnosis. Life was good. The night that changed the way I viewed the tall woman, last night, I've been out and had a couple of drinks. I meet other guys with visual impairments for dinner, and we ended up at the bar afterwards. I wasn't hammered, but we gone through plenty of beers between us, and by the time I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt decidedly lightheaded. It took me a while to make my way home, laughing and talking to a couple of the other guys from our group as we strolled along. It had been a great evening. It's probably the last truly good one I'll ever have. I bid the other guys goodnight, fumbling with my keys, letting myself in. With swaying steps, I strode into the hallway, slamming the door a little too loud behind me. I took off my jacket, hung it on the hook by the door, and I hit the light switch. She was waiting at the end of the hallway. All three hands held aloft into claws, reaching for me. The same maudlin, malevolent grin on her pale face. I swore again, louder than ever, actually jumping back a step, recoiling from the impossibly tall and terrifying figure laying in wait in my own home. The tall woman didn't move. She just stood there, staring and smiling at me. I stared back, but I sure as hell didn't smile. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath. You know how you can feel a little paranoid after a few beers? That feeling of non-specific post-alcoholic dread? Imagine that combined with a giant grinning mutant woman suddenly appearing in your home. Suffice to say, it was very, very, very uncool. I don't need this. I sighed and closed my eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I opened my eyes, her face was just a foot from my own, grinning wider than ever. She dashed the length of the hallway and was now just so close that her long, grasping arms were either side of me, her fingers twitching and clawing at the air around my face. I could see her chest heaving as if she was actually laughing silently at my attempts to dismiss her. As if the thought that I could ever be freed of her was amusing. I screamed a full-body shriek of terror and actually dropped to my knees, covering my head as if to fend off the expected blow. It never came. Finally, I lowered my hands, gasping for breath, shaking. The hallway was empty. The tall woman nowhere to be seen. I stayed there, on my knees for a moment, gasping for breath. Then I was on my feet, and I turned and ran out of my apartment, out of the building and into the street. I stood there, shivering, terrified beyond reason, without a clue as to what to do next. Finally, I pulled my phone from my pocket and I made a phone call. Hey, Andy, what's up? Jason asked. Jason, I need you to come here, I said, sobbing. Jason didn't ask why, didn't complain. Instead, he simply replied, I'm on my way. Less than 20 minutes later, his car pulled up outside, and he dashed over to the steps outside my building where I was sitting there shivering. He threw his jacket over my shoulders and asked what happened, his voice filled with concern. She's in there, I stammered. A tall woman. She's back. Okay, he said gently, helping me to my feet. Come on, man. Let's go in there and check it out. I wish I could say I was brave when we went inside, but I'd be lying. I cowered behind Jason, one hand on his shoulder as we made our way through my home. Of course we didn't find a thing. We're talking about a giant mutant woman in a pokey little one-bed apartment. Where the hell was she gonna hide? Finally, after we checked every single room twice, I had to admit that she was gone. I'm so sorry, man. I apologize. Feeling genuinely stupid. I got scared and I'm sorry. Hey, forget about it, buddy, Jason said. So, I'm here now. Where do you keep the booze? Half a bottle of bourbon later, we were both feeling pretty talkative. She's, you know, just kind of different, you know? I tried to explain. I get it, he said. It's like you saw something bad and you feel bad and that's bad. He didn't get it. No, she's different, you know? I explained. I've never had a repeat hallucination before, and they've never been scary. You know, she's not like the others. Dude, Jason said, taking another sip of bourbon. You've got, like, Charlie Boney syndrome, and you know that makes you see stuff, right? So, he waved his hands in the air like a magician and just performed a trick. I know, I replied. No, listen, Andy, he said. You know what makes you see stuff? It's just your eyes, yeah? You didn't hear anything, you didn't feel anything. This is how the stuff goes. It's your eyes. And I know it's scary, man, but you've been through like hell and high water in your life so far. You're tough. One of the toughest, bravest guys I know. You can handle some creepy hallucination. I laughed and I just couldn't help it. She is a very creepy hallucination, though. He laughed too, and we both just took a drink. You know, that could help, he said finally, his voice thoughtful. What, drinking? No, well, yes, it does, he giggled. I mean, like, demystifying her. You should give her a name. Something dumb, you know, something that's not scary. I gotta say that much as I like creepy hallucination, bitch. That's a bit of a mouthful. I laughed. Yeah, I get that, he replied. Suddenly, something he said came back to me. How about Helen? I suggested. Helen Highwater. Awesome, he said. Then he raised his glass. Here's to Helen, buddy. To Helen. I smiled and I drained my glass. Jason spent that night on my sofa, mainly because he had too much to drink that evening and he wasn't about to get behind the wheel of the car. But honestly, I think the reason he drank so much was so he had have an excuse to stay with me and keep an eye on me. I'm glad he did. Knowing that he was there made me feel safer, and I was able to get some sleep. It gave me a sense of security to know that if the strange vision that I had christened Heather or Helen had appeared again, I'd be able to call on him for support. This morning, we both needed support. It feels like a mule kicked me in the head. He groaned when he made his way to the living room. Yeah, I replied, my own head dumping. Joe's? Joe's, he replied firmly, and staggered to his feet. As we drank strong black coffee and ate muffins, we didn't talk much. Finally, Jason broke the silence. So, you feel cool now? He asked, his mouth full of blueberry muffin. I nodded. Yeah, I think so. Not still freaked out about you-know-who? He asked. Helen? I replied with a smile. No, I really don't think I am. I reckon I can handle some creepy hallucination now. Good. He laughed, giving me a hearty pat on the back. That's cool, man. I bet you can. Now, as I sit here cowering in my bedroom, too scared to go out of my apartment, I know we were both wrong about everything. Remember how earlier I told you that the thought of being institutionalized, that the very idea of losing my grasp on reality was the most terrifying thing I could imagine? Now I welcome that, because the alternative is far, far worse. After breakfast, I said goodbye to Jason and climbed into his car and drove away. A day passed without incident, and when Lois stopped by this afternoon, she even commented on how upbeat I seemed. You got a lady in your life? She asked casually. I laughed at that, wondering what she'd think if she knew the truth. Yeah, I chuckled, something like that. Good for you, she sniffed. You make sure you treat her right. That tickled me even more and I had to bite my lip. Sure, I replied. I'll do my best. Tonight, still a little white from the exertions of the previous evening, I decided to turn early. I brushed my teeth, washed my hands and face, and got changed. Finally, I fixed a glass of water and walked into the bedroom. I climbed into bed and instantly felt so relaxed. Within mere seconds, I was ready to sleep. The sudden overwhelming drowsiness that comes when you spend a whole day keeping sleep at bay. I decided that resistance was futile and sat up and switched off the light. I nearly didn't see her, but as I reached for the switch, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. My heart leaped into my throat as I turned to the foot of my bed. The tall woman was crouched there, her grinning face staring at me, and just beyond my feet, so many teeth. Her long, slender fingers spread out over my blankets, twitching slightly as she gripped the end of my bed. Slowly, excruciatingly so, her third misshapen hand came into view over her shoulder, joining the other hands on my bedding. I froze, utterly petrified. I was at a crossroads here, arriving at a pivotal moment that I'd been coming for some time. But this time I had enough. You don't scare me anymore, I said, my voice filled with defiance and anger. I'm not letting you do this to me. I reached across to the light switch. Good night, Helen, I said triumphantly, and flicked it, plunging the room into darkness. I lay there, a sense of tremendous pride surging through me, and I grinned to myself in a warm, comfortable bed, overjoyed at the emotional victory of overcoming my own fear. And then it happened. The thing that led me here. Something that turned my blood to ice water and my bowels to jelly. Good night, Andrew, her rasping voice hissed from the darkness. And that is the end of our tale tonight. I hope you have all enjoyed the tales we have told tonight, and you are having the most wonderful, frightful nightmares. Choppy will be back tomorrow to play more of his Space Marine game, and if you'd like to see more of these fabulously creepy streams, be sure to follow us on Discord where we announce it every Wednesday. Now till then, you'll have a wonderful evening and have a frightful dream. Good night.